Do you know what Coke does to you when it goes into your body? If you've ever had a Coke, you'll revisit it after watching this video. A 500 ml bottle of Coke contains 55 grams of sugar and 220 kilocalories of energy, which is why it's known as the fat, happy water. When a bottle of Coke down, only 10 minutes, sugar nutrition will enter the blood and then transported to the organs. More than 20 minutes later, these nutrients are rapidly absorbed by the body, and the blood glucose concentration then rises dramatically. The pancreas now realizes that blood glucose is soaring, and in order to lower your blood glucose, the pancreas begins to secrete a large amount of insulin to fight against blood glucose. But despite this, you still have too much glycogen left over. The excess sugar is then synthesized by your liver and transported to the adipose tissue, where it forms fat. That's a big reason why drinking Coke makes you fat. In addition to that, a 500 milliliter bottle of Coke contains 60 milligrams of caffeine. After 40 minutes, the caffeine starts to take effect. You may not feel sleepy at all, and you may be able to do things with more energy. You may even start to get excited by the combination of sugar and caffeine, as your brain produces a large amount of a substance called dopamine. This makes the brain think that consuming this type of food is good for you, so it signals your body to keep drinking. For about an hour after you've urinated, you'll probably feel a lot more tired than you did before. That's because after urination, as the caffeine and excess sugar are eliminated, your blood glucose plummets, and a slight dehydration. Now you can see why drinking Coke is as addictive as coffee. Drinking cola without any control for a long time not only destroys the blood glucose balance, but also accumulates fat, which leads to a series of physical problems. Hopefully, you and the people around you will be able to reduce your dependence on Coke after watching this video. The inventor of the M18A1 Claymore mine must have been a devil. Its internals contain 1,000 steel balls, making it incredibly powerful and capable of hitting enemies at a considerable distance. It's a directional mine, and when it explodes, the steel balls are propelled in a fixed direction at a speed of 3 Mach, causing direct harm to enemy forces within 50 meters. Even at a distance of 200 meters, it can still pose a threat to people. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military extensively used these mines, and their devastating power and extensive injuries from shrapnel became an unforgettable nightmare for Vietnamese soldiers. Due to the extreme cruelty of this mine, it has been banned by international organizations. The mine has a compact size, measuring 21 centimeters in length, 14 centimeters in height, and 3.5 centimeters in thickness. It has a foldable stand at the bottom, and at the top, there is its sight. The red area represents the approximate attack range. When in use, soldiers need to aim from a position 15 centimeters behind the sight, using a nearby tree as a reference point. They align the sight's center with a point 2.5 meters above the tree's top, and slowly align the sight's center with the red dot. This is how the mine is aimed. At this point, the mine is slightly raised, so when it explodes, the steel balls are thrown upwards, avoiding the possibility of the balls hitting the ground when the mine is laid flat. When installing the detonation device, you need to remove the adapter first, and then place the detonator and adapter back together in their original positions. The detonator is inserted deep into the mine, containing 700 grams of explosive and almost 1,000 steel balls. When placing the mine, you also need to install something behind it to prevent the mine from being pulled down when the tripwire is activated. Now, you need to take cover 30 meters away because the shockwave produced by the mine's explosion propagates in all directions. Therefore, the area behind it is not entirely safe. If you were to drop a piece of paper from space, what would happen to it? Some people say it would never reach the ground and would burn up in space. Is this true? First of all, if you were to drop a piece of paper from millions of kilometers in space, it might just float in space or be captured by other celestial bodies. So, let's assume we're dropping it from the location of a space station, which is typically in orbit around 400 kilometers above the Earth's surface. At this altitude, the paper would be in the thermosphere, where it would experience extreme temperatures. The radiation from the sun would heat it to around 1000 degrees Celsius. However, because there's no oxygen in space to support combustion, the paper wouldn't catch fire. It would endure this dry heat, and in the nearly vacuum environment, it would undergo something akin to free fall. As it descends and enters the mesosphere, around 80 kilometers up, the air density starts to increase. The mesosphere is where most of the molecules are ionized, and if a person were here without proper protective gear, it would be quite hazardous. However, for the paper, this region should generally pose no significant harm. Continuing the descent to around 50 kilometers, we reach the stratosphere, where airplanes fly, and the airflow is relatively stable. The paper should still be okay at this point. Once it makes it past this layer, it enters the familiar troposphere, where the air density continues to increase and the descent speed slows down to about 1.5 meters per second. To traverse this 12-kilometer thick layer, it would take at least a couple of hours. The challenge in the troposphere is that it contains most of the Earth's moisture, making it a perilous place for a piece of paper. Rain, snow, or hail could deal a fatal blow. But let's assume the paper manages to survive this and reaches the ground. What do you think it would look like by the time it lands? What to do to save yourself if you're accidentally buried alive? Be sure to watch this video carefully. It may help you in a time of crisis. First of all, don't panic. Keep your brain calm, because in this confined dark space, oxygen is very limited. Panic will make you breathe rapidly, but will increase the rate of oxygen consumption. Don't shout and try to let the outside world hear your first aid voice. In fact, this is not only a waste of effort, but also consume a lot of oxygen, because you are covered with a layer of soil more than 2 meters thick. So the voice basically will not be heard by others. At this time, you have to see if there is a cell phone around. If so, must pick up the phone to see if there is a signal. If there is a cell phone, please turn on the locator function at the first time and then call for help. Do not be disappointed if you do not find a cell phone, because you can still try other ways to save yourself, such as touching the surrounding area to see if there are any available tools. If not, hands are the best tool. Now, you'll need to quickly find the most vulnerable spot on top of the coffin. First, use your hand to knock on the wooden boards around the coffin. If the sound is darker, it means that the wood in this position is thicker. If the sound is crisp, the wood is thin. Once you have found the thinnest point, you can force your way through it with all your strength. Once a gap has been created, the dirt will slowly seep in, and you'll have to move the dirt to one side to keep from being submerged. To prevent the mud from getting into your eyes and nose, you must take off your clothes and use them as a hood to wrap your head. Next, you have to start from the entrance of the cave, use your hands to dig out the soil above, and then desperately move towards the top a little bit. Although this process is very difficult, but I believe that in a short time, you will be able to see the light of day. Do you have any other ways to save yourself?
When I saw what my bladder looked like when I held it in, I don't dare to hold my pee anymore. We've all been there. We're busy catching up on an important report that our boss needs right away, or halfway through a good movie. Suddenly the desire to go to the restroom begins to arise. You think to yourself, I'll hold it for a while, it's almost over, I'll go later. Of course you can hold it. But the question is, should you hold it? Urination is very important. The organs involved in urination are the kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. Let's start with the kidneys. They're two bean-like organs located on either side of the spine. One on the left, and one on the right. They're like super filters in our bodies. By cleaning the blood, the kidneys help us filter out waste and toxins and then form urine. Urine flows through the ureters to the bladder. The ureter contains a magical one-way valve to help prevent the urine from flowing back into the kidneys. And then the urine goes to the bladder. The bladder is the home of urine. When empty, the bladder is about the size and shape of a pear. Its normal capacity is 400 to 600 milliliters, about the size of a bottle of mineral water. When the bladder is full, it sends a signal to your brain to remind you that you need to urinate to empty your bladder. That's when we feel the urge to pee. At the same time, the brain sends a signal to the sphincter to let the urine pass through the urethra and out of the bladder. If you're in the habit of holding your pee for a long time, your bladder might stretch and become larger. A study found that some special jobs such as nurses often have to hold their urine all day long due to work restrictions. Their bladders are almost twice as large as normal. But that doesn't mean you should control it if you can. You can think of your bladder as a warm, moist bag of wastewater for your body. It becomes a perfect breeding ground for harmful bacteria. Holding your urine for a long time may increase the risk of infection. It can also impair the functions of the bladder and kidneys. But luckily for you, if you only hold it for a little while, don't worry too much. You'll be fine. The most important thing is not to turn it into a habit.